Alright, listen up, cabbies. I got your assignments. Riga, 643. Wheeler, 148. Nado, 804. And all of you need to join host HP and Father Malone as they examine one of the greatest sitcoms in television history, Taxi. In Night, Mr. Walters, a Taxi podcast. Banter, zero, like your boxing record.
Night, Mr. Walters.
We're in Way Media.
Greetings, Midnight viewers. Father Malone here. Welcome to a new season and a new series. We're beginning Tales from the Darkside Season 1 momentarily. But at the halfway point of this episode, we have a very special interview with Tales from the Darkside Director of Photography Extraordinaire, Mr. Robert Draper. And now, on with the new theme song. Brand new season of Midnight Viewing, the horror anthology podcast, where we discuss televised horror in all of its guises. This season, we'll be tackling the George A. Romero series, Tales from the Darkside. Look, the fact is, after the first season, Romero's involvement will be minimal, but I do not care. I'm going to be continuing to refer to this as his series for the length of the run. And with me here in the Darkside, on the Darkside, call John Cafferty. All the way from Bollywood Cinema Club, Mr. Chris Stachiw.
I was going to do a witch cackling, but I think we heard it enough in the episodes to know what it sounds like. So insert witch cackling noise here. I'm here as well.
And that other sound, the sound of whirring in the background, that can only be a projection booth. Mr. Mike White.
Try to stay into the light. That's why I'm not a professional voiceover artist.
All right, tonight we're going to be looking at two episodes from season 1. Those are Trick or Treat and The New Man. Now, gentlemen, I want to know about your experience with Tales from the Darkside, but before that, I do have to give some backstory to how the series even got here. A lot of this knowledge is from a lifetime of soaking up every piece of information about George Romero, but I also want to shout out Paul Gann's excellent The Zombies That Ate Pittsburgh, which is a reference book I have worn out and repurchased 3 times. I distinctly remember the moment in high school reaching into my book bag and pulling it up and feeling the pages detach and fly everywhere like gory confetti.
Like IOUs?
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. In 1982, Stephen King and George A. Romero came together and made the film Creepshow. It was an ode to EC Comics, a shared childhood obsession of both of them. They were actually doing it to get a version of The Stand made, but nobody would trust them with such a big budget, so they needed a trial run movie, and that was Creepshow. As far as anthology films had gone, this was the first major studio-released anthology in some time. The next year, we would see The Twilight Zone. The success of Creepshow taught the fine folks at Laurel Entertainment, that's George A. Romero and his producer, partner for nearly a decade at that point, Richard Rubinstein. They decided to fill that gap and create Tales from the Darkside, which they could not. They was going to be Creepshow, by the way, but because they had sold the rights to Warner Brothers, they could no longer call their show Creepshow. So they dispensed with Creepshow and the comic book framing and all the splash panels and everything, or reimagined it, Tales from the Darkside.
And when we got Creepshow, the show, however many years later, which I mean, I think just speaks to the value of the brand, apparently.
The enduring quality of Creepshow. Yeah, you know what's funny? So Creepshow beat the Twilight Zone movie by a year, and then Tales from the Darkside beat the return to television of the Twilight Zone 85. Who'd have thought the Twilight Zone would be an also-ran to George Romero? Twilight Zone was one of a flurry of anthologies that came after Darkside. All of those series had better budgets. They had better access to actors and top filmmakers, and they all fell by the wayside by 2 seasons, unlike Tales from the Darkside, which continued for 4. Here's a fun fact. The show was filmed simultaneously in New York and Los Angeles on opposing weeks. On one coast, they would be prepping an episode, while on the other, they would be filming. Each episode cost approximately $100,000, which is minuscule at the time. By comparison, Spielberg's Amazing Stories, $1 million per episode. The insanity of that budget.
Wow.
Half hour, $1 million. But Darkside had two secret weapons. Michael McDowell, the future author of Beetlejuice, is a heavy influence and a heavy contributor to Tales from the Darkside. And I think he actually wrote all of my favorite episodes. The other thing that Darkside had over all those shows, get ready, Mike, and I'm going to say this with total conviction. What it had over every anthology series ever is the creepiest, most effective opening title sequence of all time.
Hell yes.
It is lots of bucolic shots of rural Pennsylvania, and then a narrator intones a script written by Romero. It starts out sinister, and it only gets worse. And it comes back at the end. There's an outro. Just in case you had forgotten how freaked out you were by the opening 1 minute of this show, he comes back and basically straight up threatens you. Try to enjoy the daylight. That fucked me up as a kid. I didn't even mention the score there by Donald Rubinstein. That's Richard Rubinstein's brother, but this isn't nepotism. Donald Rubinstein had been providing scores for Romero since Martin, which is one of my favorite soundtrack scores of all time. The other aspect of it is that narrator I mentioned, Paul Sperrer, a wonderful actor. He was from Boston, married to Nancy Marchand, Livia Soprano.
Hey, everybody. I bet she was a nicer person in reality.
Oh, let's hope so.
Just recently, I was revisiting the television series Spencer for Hire, which was filmed in Boston around 85, 86. And I remember watching it then. And now it's really like a time capsule for me. And at the end of season 1, a character walks on. You can't see him, but you hear him, and it was Paul Sperrer. It freaked me the fuck out because I had only ever heard him in the guise of the Tales from the Darkside narrator. That's where we are, but where are you gentlemen falling on this series? What experience had you previously to it, if any? I'm going to start with you, Chris, because I'm guessing none at all.
If any. I make up the if any of the equation. I am the Z to y'all's X and Y. Again, I had never seen it. I had never heard... It's not that I hadn't heard anybody talk about it, but no one had ever suggested it to me other than y'all. And I figured where we were when it was suggested, we might end up just covering it. So I might just save it for a rainy day when someone gets their druthers. And again, here we are. So I was at least in that regard that I'm glad I waited, because to watch it and be the one who had never seen it before is always it's a fun hat to wear. For the most part, I've been the one wearing it a lot of the time.
You keep doing it. It's raining again, baby.
I know. And I'm cool with that because it comes from two people who I do have a lot of exposure to. Romero and Stephen King, obviously, two pretty big names in their own right, both separately and together, obviously, with something like Creepshow and then something like this. And look, Stephen King, someone that Father Malone, you and I have a very weird history with personally.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think we've ever spoken about it, but the pandemic derailed our dollar baby, which is a whole fucking thing that actually happened. And then Romero is the king of the zombie movies and has made some of the great ones, if not the greatest one.
Yes, that's correct.
It's not my favorite, but it's it's the one that's important. It's the ones that are important. And then you just talk about their other influences on their respective genres and things. Stephen King his influence will never be able to quantify it in any substantive way because of just how important he is to the genre. So I'm excited to watch it and experience it for the first time, but I am a fan of everyone who is part of the creative process to bring the show to fruition.
I remember watching this a lot when I was younger, but I could not tell you any episodes other than the word processor one that was based on the Stephen King short story, Word Processor of the Gods. I know as we go through here, I'm going to say, oh, I remember this one. But right now it's like, I mostly just remember the opening and closing of the show. So I know that I watched it enough to be very familiar with that. Yesterday, when I was rewatching these, I was just, saying it right out. I was like, okay, I remember this for sure, word by word. But Yeah, not so much when it comes to the episode. So I'm excited to get back into this and revisit this show because I have very fond memories of it.
I watched it in its initial run, and subsequently over the years, whenever you could catch it, being when it was syndicated. I'm kind of in the same boat with you, Mike. Look, I know a lot of these episodes a lot better. Any of the Romero ones I'm really familiar with. Actually, you know what? I'm taking it all back. I'm not fuzzy at all. I'm pretty damn good on this series, except there's a lot that don't have Romero or Savini or John Harrison or Michael Gornick as the director. Those are the ones that I kept seeking out, no matter if it was playing on TV or not. But I've been noticing, skimming through it, that there are quite a few I don't think I've even seen once. So I'm also very excited for this.
I don't know. I hope it's more a mix of everything we've done and not just one of the shows where they kind of peter off. That's my hope. That's my big hope with this, because we've kind of seen this weird collectively, like when we did the Tales from the Crypt show, and then when we did Twilight Zone and Night Gallery, they all kind of start petering pretty hard at varying degrees of petering. So I hope that this at least maintains throughout. That's my big hope, because again, these shows are so much fun, but it is so week to week to week because of the way the show is. So the level of quality can really oscillate a lot, really. So
I will say this: late in season 3 contains my favorite episode of the series. So
that bodes well.
That does bode well. I don't think anyone would say anything in the last season of Tales from the Crypt is their favorite anything, other than maybe favorite thing to avoid on a TV show that they like.
Nor Twilight Zone 85.
Yeah, no, I was going to say Twilight Zone 85, not so much, but there were a couple bangers when it came to Night Gallery. I seem to remember that one with the what was, not a boll weevil, the thing that laid the
earwig.
Oh, Lawrence Harvey's
earwig.
ear.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think that was third season, so that was a good one. But yeah, definitely Twilight Zone. Boy, we wanted to trot that out and shoot it in the backyard.
The Caterpillar, the name of that episode.
Thank you.
That was actually the finale of season 2.
Oh, my bad.
No.
Oh.
I take everything back.
However, Return of the Sorcerer with Bixby and Price, I enjoyed that one quite. There were quite a lot of good episodes in season 3. It's just that they got, well, we've discussed it. You all heard it in the last episode anyway. All right, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Tales from the Darkside. We're starting with Trick or Treat. This is season 1, episode 0. It's a pilot. It aired exactly 1 year before the series came on. It aired over Halloween weekend in 1983 originally as a test pilot, basically. This one is written by George A. Romero and directed by Bob Balaban. This is his directing debut. He'd eventually go on to do an episode of Amazing Stories that's nearly identical to a different episode of Tales from the Darkside. Most people probably recognize him from Wes Anderson's movies, but he is a fantastic actor, always interesting to watch. And as a filmmaker, not so great. But anyway,
well, I like Parents. I like
Parents. I like Parents too.
Oh my God, gentlemen, Parents. Is terrible.
Wait a second. Mike, I think we found it. I think we found R. Say it with me now. Transylvania 65000. It's here. It's a Bob Balaban movie.
But here's the thing. I think the other people will agree with me. So it'll be just you two singing the praises of that particular flick. That sub David Lynch. Oh my God. Well, hey, wait, man. You're telling me these staid conservative people are actually cannibals underneath? Oh my God. What a revelation. Anyway. All right. Episode 1, Trick or Treat. Here we go. Written by George Romero, directed by Bob Balaban, starring Barnard Hughes. I am Hobson. He's getting off this merry-go-round. Max Wright. He was the hater of Alf on screen and off. It's set in the 1940s. It's about a bitter miser who uses the debts owed to him by an entire town on Hallows Eve to torture children, basically. What'd you think of this one, Mike?
Yep. I really enjoyed this. I had a fun time with this. I could kind of see why this was the pilot. It moves really fast. I watched this one again right before we started recording, and I couldn't believe how fast it goes. I guess it's just a really nice, tight half-hour TV show. There are a couple things that I wanted to throw out there. While listening to Barnard Hughes, because he laughs a lot in this episode, Was he the laugh of the Joker's little laugh box in Batman 1989? I swear there's a moment where he does that like kind of thing, and I'm just like, that sounds exactly like it.
Well, I'm going to cut it in right here. I'm going to let the audience decide for themselves, but goddamn, that's intriguing. And in my mind, it actually makes sense.
Yeah, he was fantastic. I really wish there had been a little bit more Max Wright, personally. I always could do for more of him. It was kind of odd, that beginning scene that really doesn't add too much, but it does set up the character. And yes, I love that he tortures children. That's pretty fantastic. And that one of the parents has beaten his child in order to strengthen him to not be scared out of Mr. Hackles' house. So good.
Took the strap to him enough that he ain't afraid of no ghosts.
I enjoyed it. I think Mike mentioned it. It moves pretty fast. A witch just shows up at one point. Literally, when I say a witch just shows up at one point, when I was watching it with my wife last night, she goes, "Hey, where did the witch come from?" And I go, "The witch just showed up. The witch just showed up. The witch was just at the door." And he thought it was a kid dressed up as a witch, I guess. I found this fun. This was fun. That's all it needed to be. I don't think it needed to be some grand musing on anything. It's Barnard Hughes getting what he deserves as kind of I don't like a Scrooge kind of equivalent, like a Halloween Scrooge type. Like that was the fun part. That was the fun part of the story for me, is like he's Scrooge adjacent. So all of these things that are happening to him are like the Ghost of Christmas Past, but instead of that, it's just like a fucked up mutant pirate guy with like a fucking weird face. And again, like, and then he dies to the devil in the end because this guy's kind of irredeemable. Like, I had fun with it. It was exactly what it needed to be. And that's Barnard Hughes dying twice in 48 hours for me. Last time he got murdered by John Voight with a phone. So the devil's a little bit better.
And last time we saw Bob Balaban, he was giving John Voight a blowjob in a movie theater.
Yeah.
It's a reunion of sorts here. I loved this episode when I was a kid. I haven't seen it in quite some time. I like it still overall, but I think it has a bunch of problems. But I'm going to read to you Mr. George Romero's thoughts on this episode. Quote, "It was sort of a weird trip for me. I was really infatuated with the story, and it was the first time I ever sent anything off to military school to be directed by someone else. I didn't like being in that position. I felt that it was done with no real affection or glee in terms of the horror genre. I argued for doing it in Pittsburgh with the same crew we've used in our feature films. I was even willing to direct it, but I was overruled." That is a pretty good idea of where Romero and Rubinstein are in their relationship at Laurel at this point. Romero, during the first season of the show, was attempting to get Day of the Dead made. Now, eventually they made that Dead Reckoning Land of the Dead film, which is actually his original script for Day of the Dead. He was not able to get produced, and so he and Rubinstein stopped seeing eye to eye, and their relationship became a bit fractious, and that's why he's getting overruled here. Doesn't mean he's not going to still be involved. It's just that he was in preparation for Day of the Dead, which is why he didn't really direct anything on the series. I loved Barnard Hughes in it. I agree with you, by the way, that opening scene with I.M. Hobson and Max Wright, these weird little accountants, like commenting on everything, like they were just so natural, in an episode which there's some arch kind of performances. They really set the tone, I think, well. Barnard Hughes' character is an inventor, right? I mean, he mentions this. He created fasteners, and that gave him his fortune. So he's already a wealthy man. If you haven't seen the episode, he basically takes his house and he turns it into a walk-through haunted house that he can control from a little control room where it's the 1940s, so it's all levers and switches that he pulls and little bellows, and he can speak through megaphones down at them. If this character had simply been born at this time, my God, he would have created the greatest haunted house. Everyone would be paying. Like, he could have gotten his jollies all day long scaring people. Like, it's totally acceptable. The evil way he's going about it is really horrible. I like this script a lot. It's such a potent little idea that he has this sway on the town where not only are these parents beating their children into trying to get them to not be scared, which is so horrifying. But then a lot of these kids are doing it because they want to help their family and then are crushed afterwards when they couldn't. It's just, oh my God, I just feel bad all through this episode. I mean, I agree with Romero that the horror wasn't really pushed. I don't think Balaban knew what he was doing. He went, well, a witch is going to show up. That's scary. And didn't tailor the filmmaking to be scary. But I think it's still a bit of a hoot of an episode. The sound effects this is insane. It's all DeWolf library tracks. We've heard them all before. I've played a lot of these tracks when we were discussing Night Gallery, but they don't overdo it, and that's nice. It was just weird to hear this cacophony of all of the Night Gallery sounds while we transition into a new series.
Well, but it makes sense because he's sitting in a room scaring children who at no point their parents didn't just go, he's just fucking with you. You've got plenty of time. Just walk around the house. I love the simplicity of the script because it does make very little realistic sense. But the idea that this guy has this sway over the town is an interesting idea. And I think it's done. I mean, I have never seen a premise like this before. And I think it's fun the way that they do it. And I think that's fun what happens to him. I'm not sure I entirely understand what the hell happens. I guess Satan shows up and just goes, all right. But I mean, it makes sense. This guy is powered by the almighty dollar, and that's what brings him down at the end. Balaban got that shot of the dollar bill flitting out of the door as it closes, which I did appreciate. I was like, oh, I got that one. But yeah, for as much as I like Parents, this is pretty pedestrian in terms of the way it's directed. There's not a lot of style given to it, really, like other than close-up shots of Barnard Hughes crawling on the ground with a red gel filter on.
You're getting warmer. You're getting warmer now.
Yeah. Hotter.
I liked how they took the "you're getting warmer" from him and then made it Satan telling him that he's getting warmer as he's going into hell. That was pretty nice.
Satan is played by Ed French, who is actually the makeup effects artist on the series. So I think anytime he was lacking model, he just made himself up. He's good too. So yeah, I like that scene a lot. The repetition of the warmer, it got a little bit much. Also, who bought the tombstone? There's a tombstone at the end that's carved, ironically.
Yes, it got there really fast too.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's not a lot of internal logic to this, so I kind of just leave my logic at the door and go, just magical realism. This guy's getting punished for being a dick. That's why I said it's kind of like Scrooge in A Christmas Story. It's just the magical realism of the situation. Don't think about it too hard.
Right? Yeah, because those ghouls and goblins and that amazing witchy poo type witch. I love that the witch is just like the stereotypical witch. But yeah, all of these guys, I'm guessing that they're just mad because he's kind of co-opted the holiday for bad reasons. So yeah, they're basically the ghosts that show up and scare the hell out of Scrooge.
That decaying pirate who's cackling at him, the laugh emanating from him is from Mr. Tim Curry.
I love the design of that.
Yeah, no, that was great. I wanted more of him. I wanted more of just actual personifications of trick-or-treaters showing up. Every skit, a real ghost shows up, the floating mass. That would be fun.
Yeah, it took me a little while to realize, the little girl was the witch and the little boy was the devil. And then we've got, who is it? Billy is the one that who he's great. He's just got that little voiceover every single time we see him. I can do it. I can do it.
I love when he pops his head out of the door and goes, I don't believe your demons aren't real. And he pops his head back in.
It was amazing.
That was Oh, he was totally leaving until he saw his dad, the one with the strap. Also, in that one, obviously, it's horrible that he's beating his kid and not doing what you had suggested, which is I would have given my child a strap and said, anything that comes at you in there, just fucking kill it. You're absolutely allowed to. That should curb your fear. But when that kid finally breaks down and comes out of the house, and the father, that's the same dad from League of Their Own. He's such a sweetheart. It's a genuine embrace there. So yeah, good stuff.
I remember him from The Rocketeer. That's what I remember him from, where he plays also a sweet dope, who I believe is the one who dresses up as the clown and goes up in the plane and has to be saved. I like that he plays that like hangdog really well. I'm just like, I beat my kid. It's just like, You wouldn't believe that first dad would beat his kid, but they had to have a dad in there who's the personification of a bad 40s father using the strap or the switch.
But not enjoying it, at least. He's doing it because he needs to get his family out of debt and out of the thrall of fucking horrible trick of a human.
I mean, the Max Wright scene does at least show us that Barnard Hughes' character would go after 4 cents for a cup of coffee. Well, you could just take that out of our pay if you want.
Yeah, I love how amused he finally is. Like, okay, fine. Yeah, give me another cup of coffee, you ridiculous thing.
Oh, God.
And he also, like, you mentioned the witchy poo witch, but Barnard Hughes also looks like just the most generico old man possible. Like, everything about the story feels like perfectly of the season. So yeah, when it aired, like this had everything working for it as far as I'm concerned. Like, even though it is just like a generic witch, like when I think of a witch at Halloween time, if I'm thinking of like a certain kind of decoration, it's going to be that witch. It's not going to be anything else.
I do wish that, look, he gets just a fine comeuppance. Going to hell, he can't really top that one as far as a bit of vengeance, but
right.
But how about a little bit more scared, Barnard Hughes? How about you should experience some terror, you fucking dickhead, that you scarred all of these children for life? Let's see these things take you apart.
Yeah, to your point before, like, it's not, horror is not necessarily what I think it's worrying itself with. It's much more, I wouldn't say another one of those Bob Balaban movies other than Parents that I cannot defend is My Boyfriend's Back, which...
I like that. I actually have that on DVD over there.
Okay, well, I can't defend that one as much. But again, in my mind, like, Bob Balaban is not really a horror director anyways. So
fair.
Granted. Yeah.
Right.
But that doesn't mean the rest of the series won't have some absolute heavy hitters in the horror genre. Like,
I'm ready for it. You. Yeah. Bob Balaban, not so much.
Yeah.
No. I didn't realize that Bob Balaban directed 2 episodes of one of my favorite one-season shows, Chris, which is Dead Last.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, which when I finally take over the one-season show, that's what I'm going to be talking about.
Just waiting for you.
What is this Dead Last?
Dead Last was it was 3 teenagers who are in a band, and they end up, I think they kill somebody, or they run into, of all people, oh God, why am I blanking on his name? The guy that played Murdoch in the A-Team.
And now I'm blanking on it. Dwight Schultz.
Lieutenant Broccoli. Yes. Dwight Schultz. And they get the power to see the dead, and they're out solving mysteries in their van, of course. And I love it. I thought it was great. There was some really dark humor to it. And it was Taylor Labine was one of the 3 main people who I always love.
Guy who gets mentioned as is in things people like, but rarely gets to run long enough for it to really catch on.
The guy who was licking toads on the X-Files, if memory serves.
Yeah. Wasn't he also the best friend in Reaper?
Yes. Reaper was a great show. And also canceled too soon.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, all right. Good evening, Midnight viewers. We have a very special segment for you. We spoke with Darkside royalty, Mr. Robert Draper. He's a producer and director, an editor, a teacher, and for the past 40 years, a supernaturally talented cinematographer. Not only did he lens a whopping 16 episodes of Tales from the Darkside, he was also the DP on 7 episodes of Tales from the Crypt, a series Chris Stachiw and I covered on Chronicles from the Crypt, and for the past 4 seasons, he has been what Taxi and Cheers director James Burrow calls a resident filmmaker on the Shudder series Creepshow. Not only that, but Mr. Draper's collaboration with director John Harrison gave us our only Darkside feature film, Tales from the Darkside, the movie. I sat down with Mr. Draper to talk all things Tales from the Darkside.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I don't know what it is. All of a sudden, it's like people have discovered Halloween 5. I think I've done interviews for... I've got another interview next week, and that will make 7... interviews in the last 3.5 months.
Mike, what? It's a Halloween 5 renaissance.
Yeah, it's crazy. And Darkside's not far behind it.
Really? Oh, well, that's very heartening to hear, actually, because it deserves a re-examination, obviously.
Yeah, we should do Tales from the Dark Side, the series 2.0?
Yes, like immediately.
Well, I think that's Creepshow.
I know it is. It really is. I mean, they're rather interchangeable.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I mean, wasn't in my mind that, or from what I've read, that was the initial impetus of the show, the success of Creepshow, that they wanted to make a Creepshow series, but then Warner Brothers said, "We own Creepshow," and they said, "Haha, Tales from the Dark Side."
Yeah. Yeah, I think George Romero and Richard Rubenstein and Stephen King were sort of part and parcel of all that coming about. An old school director by the name of Aram Avakian, and he was a writer director, and he was real good pals with Francis Ford Coppola, and also Ralph Rosenblum, who was Woody Allen's editor. Ralph edited Thousand Clowns, and he also edited Annie Hall.
Oh my goodness.
So Ralph was, he was one of the top editors in the business, and the two of them knew this producer who was somehow tied in with the guys who were doing Tales from the Dark Side.
Okay.
And so they got me an interview with the producer on Tales, and I'd never shot narrative stuff at all. All I had was docos and music videos and commercials on a reel. And so they got a big wrap up from Ralph Rosenblum and Aram, and they said, "Look, we don't need to see a reel. We'll give you the first episode, see you go, and if it goes well, then we'll put you on for the series." And so that was basically how it started. And the week before we did day one of shooting, I didn't sleep. I don't think I slept for 7 days. No, man, I do a lot of prep. I mean, I do an enormous amount of prep on anything I shoot. So when I go in, I know exactly what I'm doing. There's no standing around going, "Oh, gee, I wonder what I'll do next." Yeah, I know exactly what I'm going to do. But that gives me the room to be creative and flexible. But on that show, the amount of prep that I did in that first week, holy mackerel! And I just couldn't sleep. I was so bloody nervous.
This is Inside the Closet?
No, the first episode was A Case of the Stubborns.
Oh, okay. You did that first.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was Jerry Cotts directed it, and it was with Eddie Bracken.
Yes. Wonderful Eddie Bracken.
Where he wouldn't die. And that was the first one. So, I shot the first day, and they came to me at the end of the first days, the next morning, and said, "Okay, you're on for the show." So,
and a great weight was lifted off of you. Weeks.
Yeah, and then I felt like I could have slept for about a week.
Romero's story, like when he was coming up, he was an editor at his local news stations for like the 16 million. So that's interesting, that kind of a parallel thing between the two of you.
Well, when people ask me, because before that I'd shot hundreds of documentaries, and people ask me the best way to become a DP, because I don't agree with this film school business where you go to film school, immediately you're called a DP. You're not really a DP, you're a camera person,
Yeah.
And Vilmos Zsigmond used to say, you're a cameraman for 10 years, you're a cinematographer for 10 years, and after that you become a director of photography. And
That's a wonderful way to look at it.
Yeah. And it's kind of true. I used to say in Australia, I want to shoot a feature film, and they go, "Yeah, you don't know enough stuff yet." No, and it was like, bloody old people, pissing me off because I'm a young guy coming up. But you don't realize until 20 years down the road how much you really don't know about being a director of photography, because it's not about making pretty pictures.
Right, but that's what makes a good to great director of photography, right? The one who at least recognizes their skill set at the time and knows that they need more.
Yeah. And I tell you, the thing, when we were doing Tales from the Dark Side, they had a set of rules on that show. And
I'm dying to know these.
Yeah, and there are a set of rules, and the rules were, number one, you had to shoot on prime lenses. You couldn't use a zoom. Oh no, no, actually, I can't remember if we had to shoot on primes or on the Zoom, but it was one or the other. You could only use 100 ASA stock. You were not allowed to use 400 ASA. You had to shoot at the widest you could shoot was T4. So there was no shooting at 1.3 or anything like that. Yeah, everything had to be lit with hard light. There was no soft light allowed. And then we would do 4 days prep, 1 day pre-light, and 4 days shoot. And then so in the prep, the director and the DP would sit down and we had to come up with a shot list. We had Monday and Tuesday to come up with a shot list. And then I had to draw out a lighting plot for all the sets that we were going to be shooting in, a really detailed lighting plot. And then on Wednesday afternoon, we'd sit down with the producer, the production manager, and the line producer, and we had to present, and the AD, and we had to present our plan. These are the shots we want to do, scene by scene, and this is the lighting, and go through the whole thing. And you were allowed 100 shots per episode and 20 optionals. And if you were doing well, you could add optional shots in. If you were doing bad, the optionals didn't come in. But you had to make those 100 shots. And if you fell behind and you went under the 100 shots, they would just remove a page. Yeah, but we very rarely fell behind because we were so well prepped. At the time, you felt that you're under all these restrictions. But I tell you what, I learned so much about scheduling and working fast and being able to estimate how long it was going to take to do a shot, and learn. And I learned lenses so that I don't need to walk around with a director's viewfinder. I mean, I knew those lenses because you didn't have time. I mean, you had to work like a bat out of hell, and you're working always with hard light, which I loved because I actually fell in love with film noir. So, when they said it's all hard light, it was like, awesome. That suits me. And so I became really good at working with hard light under really tight conditions. But yeah, Tales from the Darkside was my first best learning experience was 4 years as a news cameraman and doing docos and all that sort of stuff. And my next best experience was the I think 3 seasons of Tales from the Darkside I did.
On this show, Midnight Viewing, we've been looking at a lot of anthology series over the years. We watched The Twilight Zone 1985. We watched Tales from the Crypt, which you were also involved in. I'd like to talk to you about that another time, maybe. And Night Gallery is what we just wrapped up on. And watching all of those series, in some cases with budgets a lot more than you guys had, in some cases less, and sometimes a little bit more. In particular with Night Gallery, they used their work on sound stages almost like a crutch to overlight everything so they could turn everything around really quickly. And when I watch Tales from the Darkside, the lighting is so atmospheric and fantastic. Like on most anthology shows, everything gets overlit and it's obvious that we're on a set. What you guys were doing with these interiors, particularly sometimes you guys were shooting exteriors on a sound stage and then going into an interior. It's all magnificent, particularly the stuff that takes place interior with it's supposed to be daylight outside. The way you were lighting all of that stuff is amazing. I'm shocked that this is like your first step into like narrative filmmaking because it all looks so good. And now you're telling me about hard light noir. It makes a whole lot more sense because it's so atmospheric. I don't know if that so much as a massive compliment because we've seen a lot of these shows and this is the best looking of them.
Oh, well, thanks, mate. I really appreciate you saying that. I mean, like I said, I put an enormous amount of prep into everything. And so I would prep the living daylights out of the shows because I wanted them to look good. And I also had a challenge for myself that every show should have its own look, and And given the budget and the limitations that you've got on a lot of these things, even on Creepshow, I mean, there are a lot of limitations, even though it's a bigger budget than we had on Tales from the Darkside. But you still have to work incredibly fast, so there's a lot of compromises that you've got to make. And I've had people come to me and say, "Well, look, I've seen how fast you can work on Creepshow. I've got a feature, and we need to." And you go, "No. There's a big difference between the compromises you get away with on a small screen over the compromises. If I made those same compromises on a big screen, you'd be dead. The film, it wouldn't work."
I don't want to say that on any anthology series, I never want to say that there's a definitive episode, but Inside the Closet is the definitive episode of Tales from the Darkside.
Tom Savini.
Yes. Oh my God. And Michael McDowell's first script for Tales from the Darkside. So it's like the perfect Tales from the Darkside thing. Savini and Michael McDowell, and there's a beastie involved, and Fritz Weaver. Yeah. Like coming over from Creepshow just to anoint the entire thing. And again, not so much a question, but there are images from that episode that have haunted me since childhood. So I wanted to thank you. I'm not being ironic. I wanted to thank you for those. But look, the pan, I don't know if it's a pan, but it goes from her in the bed and it slowly pans down to Lizzie opening her eyes. And it is the most horrifying thing of all time. And then I'm just going to keep praising it. And then at the end of that episode, Lizzie is the cutest thing of all time. How'd you do that, man?
Yeah, I know. Fall in love with Lizzie. Yeah, that episode, it was the first time I'd met Tom, and we had an absolute ball on that. And we're still good friends. I mean, we've kept up with each other over the years, and we did an episode of Creepshow in season 1.
Certainly did.
But Tom, when we did Lizzie, because it was in that little, I forget what you call those little doors in the attic, but we moved from LA to Maine, and the house we moved into in Maine, the 2 kids' bedrooms had those little doors in them.
Oh no.
And I had to go up and screw planks across the doors and keep them shut. And there had to be a nightlight by the door because the kids couldn't sleep in there. It was like, there is no fucking way I'm going to stay in this place when they're like that. And if they heard the slightest noise, like, snow falling off the roof, they'd come running down.
Oh, no doubt. Just the nightmare doors.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. And you look at it now and you go, geez, why would you get scared by that? But, as a little kid, it scared the living daylights out of you.
Oh my God. Yeah. Just what a spectacular episode. Now, okay, just talk me through that. You have how many days to shoot that? And is that on location? Is that on a stage?
That was all on a stage. Yeah.
Oh my God.
We shot in this tiny stage in Queens. And all I know about it is Pink Floyd used to rehearse there. It was the Pink Floyd rehearsal stage or something in Queens.
And a layer to Tales from the Darkside.
Yeah. And there were 2 stages and they were only tiny. I can't remember how big they were, but the sets, everything was on set because, we did do, I think, a couple of days where we went out on location, but we had to it was a wheel to location from the studio.
Okay.
Wasn't a drive to because we just didn't have the time to drive anywhere. So everything was done on the stage. And so they would be built, construction would be working on one side of the stage, of the building. And on the other side, they're shooting another episode, So it was always this constant battle of, they got to shoot for 4 days, but the set needs to be built in 4 days because I've got to pre-light it on the 5th day. So, there was a lot of pre-lighting going on while there was still wet paint on the walls.
Is it true that Tales from the Darkside was filming on both coasts?
Yeah. They had one group in LA shooting and another team in New York, and I was on the New York side.
I just love that was the part of the production that it was on.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy.
And utilizing everyone, like good actors, like particularly you guys in New York, just had a treasure trove to draw from, and
it was fantastic because we had some of the best stage performers, in the history of theatre coming in. I mean, it was just awesome, just day after day after day, fantastic actors coming in. And Julianne Moore was in the movie, but
All right, yeah.
but
Speaking of the movie and the series, you worked with Christian Slater twice as a tiny tot and then as a young man in the film.
yeah, I've worked with Christian Slater a few times, but that was pretty funny.
Yeah. Speaking of powerhouse New York actors, Victor Garber in the Tear Collector. My God, with Jessica Harper, who I've had the pleasure to speak. Actually, she's just luminous. How was that to work with those two?
Well, Jessica Harper was something else. I mean, I'd fallen in love with Jessica Harper before I even left Australia. And so when they said she was on the show, it was like, it was almost all I could do to contain myself, because it was like, oh my God.
When you fell in love with her, was it in Phantom of the Paradise, perhaps?
Yeah.
Of course. Let me show you my Death Records tattoo.
Yeah, there you go.
In fact, my girlfriend has that across her back. We're all Phantom fans here.
Oh, that's funny.
I didn't actually, because you one of the precious few people I can speak to who worked with Divine.
Oh, yeah. What did we do with Divine?
The Seymour Lama episode. It was.
Oh, right. Seymour Lama, yeah.
Which, by the way, I remember.
I worked with Divine and with Meatloaf.
Yeah.
Meatloaf was in Monsters.
It was in Monsters. Okay, yeah. My God, you've worked in so many fantastic anthology series. You realize that, right?
Well, the funny thing is when I came over here, the very first I did Tales from the Darkside, and I told my agents, look, I don't want to get stuck doing horror films, and because I said that's not my thing. I don't mind doing horror films like The Shining or The Exorcist, but I don't want to get stuck doing lower budget horror films. And then Halloween 5 came up, and they said, you've got to do that because it's a Hollywood film and that's your first Hollywood picture. And I didn't really want to do it, but they said, you got no choice, you got to do it.
Yeah.
So I did Halloween 5, but it's been this never-ending parade of Tales from the Darkside, Tales from the Crypt, Halloween 5, Dr. Giggles. It's like bloody hell. Now Creep Show, and But I got to say, the one thing with shooting horror is it is a lot of fun, especially with all the prosthetics and everything involved. It really is a hoot, and it's also a challenge. I mean, photographically, it's a real challenge because. It's real easy to make those prosthetics look like rubber suits. And so working under the pressure that we've got and trying to keep it atmospheric and avoid the latex looking like latex and make everything work it's a real challenge. So, it is something that I've sort of grown to love rather than going, no, I don't want to do it.
Yeah, right. At a certain point, Vincent Price had to surrender and just say, okay, I'm a horror guy.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is when I was doing I can't remember if it was the first season or the second, but I got a call from John Harrison, and John, you know John, right?
Oh, I don't know him personally, but I adore the man. Continue.
Yeah. So John called up, and the first words out of his mouth were, "Do you like film noir?" And I said to him, "Well, do I like film noir? Let me start listing off the films." So we were instant friends. And the episode he was coming from LA to New York to shoot was Everybody Needs a Little Love.
Oh, okay, perfect.
And he said, I want it to have a real film noir feel to it. So it was like, no problem, all hard light, we're good. But John and I we're sort of working together on a potential feature film that we might be doing very shortly, but I can't say too much about.
Certainly, but I won't press. But that's fantastically exciting.
Yeah. When you hear what it is, you'll be even more excited, I think.
Oh, good.
Yeah, but it's all very tightly under wraps at the moment. But yeah, we did a couple of episodes on Tales from the Darkside. Then we did the movie, And then we almost worked together on Tales from the Crypt. That's a long story. We'll talk about that later.
All right.
And then we've done a few TV movies and miniseries and stuff like that. So we've been working and we've been friends, and our kids grew up together and all that sort of stuff. So I've known John since about 84.
Wow. Well, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. That's when you guys started collaborating on Tales from the Darkside. And what a fruitful and fantastic
And I love working with him because he is a fan of cinema, and we always go back to the language and the grammar of film. We don't look at what's the latest gizmo we can use to make this, to make people go ooh ah. We look at what can we do in the language of cinema to make a really compelling story.
The one interaction I had with Mr. Harrison was to congratulate him on all of the transitions in Tales from the Darkside, the movie. The theatrical things you guys were doing, The Cat from Hell, it's breathtaking. It's so simple. And like you said, everyone's, how can we morph this or, wipe or pan this or CG that? And it's just like, how about you turn this light on and this light off?
Yeah, well, we spent weeks working those transitions out because we had to do them practically and on location. And the one where William Hickey's in front of the fireplace and then it transitions to the car driving down the road and it flips over and goes up in flames, and then we pull out and he's back in front of the fireplace. That was a combination of shooting on location, painting the location onto a theatrical screen, shooting the scrim in front of the car with a flame bar in the studio, and then finishing it on the location, pulling out of the fireplace on the real location. But when we looked at it, John said, I'd love to do something where we don't have to dissolve in and out of the flashbacks. And we started looking at it and working out how we're going to do it. And most of that stuff is practical and on location. And to make it work, I had to do double lighting of every scene because we didn't have LEDs back then. So I couldn't change color temperature in the lights. So when we went from normal lighting to blue, I had to have two sets of lights. So every set where one of those transitions happens had to be double lighting and all run through big 5 and 10K dimmer boards to be able to execute the changes.
All that care shows on the screen. All the planning, it's documented forever.
We love that stuff. That thing's great. And in this new film, there are some transitions that we've got to do that we're looking at even snazzier ways. But I'll tell you where a lot of that came from. We both love One from the Heart.
My God, yeah, they're re-releasing it right now.
Yeah. And in One from the Heart, Storaro used a lot of theatrical scrim to play scenes against each other and to transition through them. And that's where that came from. And I said to John, look, I think if we look at One from the Heart, I think we can do some of the transitions with theatrical scrim. Now, we wanted to do more, but it was too expensive, and it was hard to work out, to calculate exactly how we were going to do it. So we decided to do most of them on location and do them practical, and then the only one that we did between the location and the set was the going into the car. Yeah. And we had to work out the blocking of every single shot in those sequences because they all had to work. If they didn't work, the transitions wouldn't work.
They work spectacularly, and you got to hang out with William Hickey right in front of you which must have been a trip.
He was pretty cool, and so was David Johansen, especially when he had to swallow the cat.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks, mate.
This episode is called The New Man. This is Season 1, Episode 1. Aired originally on September the 30th in 1984. Written by Mark Durand from a short story by Barbara Owens. This one was directed by Frank De Palma and stars Vic Tayback, Chris Hebert, that annoying kid from Last Starfighter. Also the annoying kid from Twilight Zone 85. Kelly Jean Peters, Billy Jane, he's just one of the guys, and Paul Jenkins. Gentlemen.
Damn straight.
This is our third anthology series that we've reviewed, and this is the third appearance by Mr. Jenkins. Something in the Woodwork on Night Gallery and Dead Run on Twilight Zone 85. He's the new man here. I'd give an introduction to this, but instead I'm going to let the real first Avenger, English thespian Patrick McNee, introduce this episode.
Addictions are an unpleasant word for habits our bodies and our minds do not choose to let us be rid of. But if one rebels against the domination of one's subconscious and of one's belly and blood, then the fight against addiction is a hard one. It's a battle that's constant, and in the end, we don't always come out the winner. Watch, Mr. Alan Coombs is having some problems with an old addiction in The New Man.
That is the final 30 seconds of a 3-minute introduction by Patrick McNee for the British run of Tales from the Darkside.
Oh my.
He acted as Rod Serling. They're all available on YouTube if you want to check them out. They are very eloquent, very erudite, and in some cases very instructive for the episode you're about to watch, and also completely derails any of the tension built up by that opening title sequence and then directly into the episode. You don't need narration on any of these, but it's a fun curiosity.
That completely undermines the episode in a way I was not expecting it to. It makes it sound so fun.
Yes.
Sir Dennis Eaton Hogg, like it's like there's nothing about it that is menacing. It takes all the menace out. And it's probably also because he's British. That has to be a huge part of it as well. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's something about the British accent that can be so disarming, and that is very disarming. I liked it, but it's very disarming.
Oh, that, like I said, that's just the tail end of it. So he's actually rather jocular through it. Like, oh, people who give up their vices too quickly, I don't trust them. Like that, there's that in there. Like it's all too welcoming. And again, 3 minutes. Can you imagine a night gallery thing where Rod Serling walks around for 3 minutes talking about that painting? You'd lose your mind.
Wow. Yeah. Ooh.
Wow. God, the amount of time that you would have to carve out in those episodes for that. Right?
Yeah, right. Like it's a blackout sketch, basically.
So I just want to put this out here. I hated this episode.
Well, there we go.
I just hated it. I hate when people are gaslit. So this whole thing of like, of course you remember, your son. You don't remember your son? Come on. And Vic Tayback just being Vic Tayback. I fucking love the guy. What do you mean? Last time we saw him, Chris, he was yelling about being an artist on Columbo way back in the Suitable for Framing episode. And here he is just going off, which is great because people are treating him like garbage. And apparently, so how does this work? Is it the guy at his office and this devil child that both are working in tandem and they find ex-drunks to work at their office?
Maybe.
Oh, wait a second. Okay. I was about to say, I feel like we could go read around the room on this one. So if that might be what you're putting out, I thought it was much more mundane of just, this is the representation of alcoholism. This child is Vic Tayback in this child, or, going back and forth. But the child actually exists. I don't know how to square that away, which is the problem. Like that, as they say, like that interpretation only takes you so far. So I don't know. Like I at one point I want to say like it's exactly what Mike is saying, but like that's fucking insane. Like if that's what it is, like that makes this episode even nuttier than possible. But I thought it was just Jerry is your scapegoat that you give your addiction, or again, it could be any number of things, but it is the human personification of addiction. Father Malone, bring us home. What's your reading?
And again, Chris, maybe. This could be a delirium dream from somebody who is coming down off of alcohol after a bender, after they've lost their family, and this is how they've imagined they've lost their family. He does wake up in that child's room completely drunk and then speaks the line that the boss keeps saying, the waste not, want not.
What about the denouement? How does that play into it for you?
Obviously, my theory falls apart there. But
And that's the thing. Mike's is the only one that doesn't fall apart.
Right. And Mike's is the one that I believe. I don't know that they're going out and finding these former alcoholics, or maybe they are, or maybe they're creating them, but there's something going on at that office, obviously. Like, it's that guy listening in. Oh, he needs to celebrate. Let me bring him the drink. Thus it begins. And it's the same child visited upon each of these alcoholics. Does that mean that he's just the physical manifestation of alcohol wrangler? That could be it. It could be a melding of the two. I like that. I like that at least there is a debate here that doesn't feel insulting. It doesn't feel like a lot of endings of Night Gallery episodes where we would go, "What the fuck was that? What was that? Was it that simple? Or is it actually that fucking insane?" Like this, I'm like, could be this, could be that. And then the strength of the episode or its failure rests on the episode itself as far as the acting and how well directed it is. I love Vic Tayback. I think he's fucking great here. As good as he's ever been, honestly. And he always delivers. I grew up, as I'm sure, Mike, you watched Dallas, I'm sure. Yeah, to me, that was Vic Tayback, this sort of gruff but lovable bear of a guy. Forget how ferocious he can be sometimes. And the other version of Vic Tayback I always think of is Bell Oxmix from Piece of the Action in Star Trek. His bellowing in that, too, is so good. And I think he's great here. And I think he really sells this, like you said, gaslight tale is what it is. But no worse than some of the Twilight Zone 85s. The world has suddenly slipped out of my perception and I can no longer reconcile it. And when I rewatched it for this podcast for the first time, I too hated it. And then I watched it again and again. And now I actually really, really like the episode. A lot of it is because of that debate. And apparently this episode is very heavily debated amongst fans of Tales from the Darkside, probably the most debated. And they brought up all of the theories that we've brought up, and I don't know, I enjoy it.
I'm of two minds. Like I could see myself enjoying it, and I do enjoy parts of it, but I think also maybe it's just me, but like this, I don't know. I feel like I feel like it's weird that this is. I thought you were going to say earlier, like, oh, this is the third time. This is the third time we've had like an overt alcoholism episode with a fair amount of like tongue clucking. And I think this one is probably the least, but I would direct our listeners to Kentucky Rye.
I would say no, don't listen to him.
But you know what I mean, right? Like in terms of like a similar thing of like alcohol is bad and alcoholism is bad, and look at this guy being drunk and like, okay, like yes, but I don't know, like I enjoyed parts of it, but there is a little bit of it where it's just like, man, I kind of I'm over this kind of storytelling. Like the gaslighting thing is a little like, yeah, okay. But I do say, I will agree with you. Vic Tayback is pretty fun. He's definitely just going for it. What a creep or punk or whatever he's calling his kid. It's like, Jesus Christ. And he's just reveling in it too. And he starts getting that big beard, the 5 o'clock shadow, and then his hair starts looking wild. He looks like a wild man. That part of it is fun, watching his character take that journey, but I don't know if the trappings of the episode live up to the questions it's maybe trying to ask.
Yeah, I've never seen a subtle Vic Tayback performance. He's almost always just turn that dial all the way up.
But I will say what you just mentioned, Chris, the interactions between him and Jerry, his possibly imagined, possibly manifestation, possibly something else entirely child, I love them. I think that's what I kind of hung on to when I watching his interactions with them, because he doesn't really get desperate quickly. He's just annoyed by the whole thing, except for the implication that this is happening because he's drinking again, in which case his performance there is fantastic. It's if you've ever been in a situation where you can't prove you've done something or not, and it's his, well, I said it, desperation there is really good, but the interactions with the kid, which is just like, he keeps interrogating him over and over again, like, where'd you go to school? What's your birthday? Hey, you went there long? Oh, it's me and this kid again. This is our dinner tonight? Really? Oh,
is that the darkest reading? Is if you just take this literally, and he's just literally a drunk. He is possibly fallen off the wagon, and this child does exist. But then again, that you can't square away. If you take again, like you mentioned, Mike, if you take the little twist, the little stinger at the end out, then you could do it that way, but that stinger at the end is so intentionally fucking weird. Like, it's everything about it is so weird that it almost makes me wonder, like, was everything just intentional? Because you notice him offer it to Vic Tayback more times than he offers it to the other guy. And then you wonder, like, well, did Vic Tayback actually turn it away, or did he just drink it? And like you mentioned, Father Malone, is this all just in his head? Like, I don't know, like that the denouement might be the best part of the entire episode because it's so bizarre. It almost just leads you into a field of possible. It's a hell of an episode to like be your first episode of your show outside of your pilot. Like, what a fucking episode to just go for it with.
Yeah, we're going to see a lot of that. Like, one of the things I love about this show is it really did give a platform to a lot of creative and interesting people who would not have gotten on network television ever. I mean, this isn't network, this is syndicated, but, you know, certainly not distributed to the masses they would be ordinarily. Like a lot of authors, a lot of directors, a lot of actors. That's totally on display here for the first one. Interesting fun fact, Vic Tayback is in the first episode of the series and he's in the last episode of the series.
I love the way he looks at the end of the episode. I really do. Like, kudos to the makeup department for making him look just like about as rough as humanly possible. And that room, that the way that they shoot that room at the end too is also really great, just to make him feel really small in that room.
I think they might have built a set for that, actually, to make it look like as odd as it did.
I so would have handled that situation differently than he did. I probably would have been like, okay, well, let's do like a blood alcohol test, maybe get a breathalyzer, and like really like prove it out, and just like, okay, like let's see the birth certificate, you know, not to sound like Donald Trump, but it's just like, let's approach this logically. But it's Vic Tayback, so it's just right up. What do you mean?
Yeah, that he does bring up the birth certificate, but the wife is so shocked. But there would come a point before you start drinking heavily, I think, where you would go, listen,
right,
I'm a reasonable man.
Yeah.
I don't think this child belongs to me. Please prove it to me. Show me some photos of me holding him as a baby up till now. Like, can we talk to other people outside this house who know Jerry as well? Can we go to the school and talk to his teachers, please? Maybe I had a stroke. Maybe I'm not well. Help me.
Honey, I'm having a real hard time here. It's not the alcohol, but something is going. Yeah, like I might have had a stroke or a seizure. Please help me.
Well, like, and again, like to go down the path of what Mike said, like if that's what's going on, is this kid like a shared hallucination? Because the wife is like, he's our son. It's our child. Like, this is our child. And then this is the same kid at the end. So, I mean, I don't know. I think I'm more now, if I have ever been, in terms of this specific episode of Tales from the Darkside. I think it's like this weird, like, energy monster that like feeds off of, I don't know, like unwell people, like per its belief, like, and for whatever reason, it picked a place that, you know what that place reminds me of? I wouldn't be surprised if in from stage left, Shelley the Machine Levine walked in and sat at that desk.
Like,
that would be amazing.
Rio Rancho.
I just closed the biggest deal of my life.
You want something to
your
drink?
son's here.
Yeah, that's the thing. They don't necessarily have to go looking for drunk real estate agents in 1980. Like, they're coming to you.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like, that's fun. Like, if you take it that way, then yeah, this is just like a complete wild. And again, very on topic for the time. Like, that's the other thing. Yeah. You know, kind of similar to Shatterday.
Right. Yeah. Feels a lot like that. That's what I kept thinking about with Shatterday and wordplay. The world no longer makes sense to me somehow.
Oh, yeah.
Tapping into that same sort of paranoia, early 80s paranoia, but, you know, obviously ultimately a universal paranoia.
I'm excited. This is a good opening salvo here for like what comes next.
Chris, I mentioned that when I first watched it again, I was like, geez, I don't like this one at all. And it was because I had fallen immediately into that, oh, this is just an allegory for his alcoholism. And then rewatching it again, I'm like, wait, what is Jenkins doing here? Why is he so gleeful?
He's in on it,
That's
right?
the thing. Like, is he a recovered alcoholic that this little demon has trapped, and his reward for finally pushing them over the edge and calling in Jerry is to get a double shot of bourbon?
I mean, that's the more fun explanation as far as I'm concerned. Like, I've seen enough of these alcohol is a thing, or alcoholism, or or addiction. Oh, Jerry is addiction. Is Jerry in the room with us right now? Like we've seen that enough. Like this, if that's what this is like just fucking bizarre, which I'm cool with. Just let it be weird, guys. Like, and I'm fine with that.
And this series has a dedication to the supernatural, so you're going to get that more often than not. This isn't like Rod Serling trying to slip Alfred Hitchcock Presents past us. There's going to be a devil or a demon or a monster at some point.
And that's the other thing. Like, I don't have that frame of reference yet. So if I had that frame of reference, having seen the entire show, to come back to this, it then feels more than ever like that it's a actual physical creature that is fucking doing all of these things. Like that. Because again, that's always my concern with, not Tales from the Crypt, but Night Gallery and Twilight Zone 85. It's like they did things that they like went up to that line and then they decided not to do the thing. And it's like, wait, why? This is the kind of show that would embrace the supernatural or the paranormal, and they didn't. And so I'm always hesitant to expect that maybe they're doing it here. So to hear you say, well, that is the case and that is what's going to happen, that's reassuring to me.
I think a lot of series, even the best of them, always have a kind of a high-mindedness when it comes to dealing in the trenches with the horror. Certainly we saw that with Rod, who was just like, he had total disdain for constantly running through the cemetery. Even Twilight Zone 85, we would get an occasional one, but only a toe dipped into the actual horror genre. And I, for one, am excited once more to be watching this series. There are going to be highs and lows. Look, it's an anthology series. They're not all going to be great. There's some bad ones on the way, but there are some really good ones and some genuinely frightening ones, which is, what more can you ask for?
I'm ready for a return to horror because it has literally been years since we did a horror anthology series. It was literally Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm very excited.
All right, with that, ordinarily we'd be playing you a preview for the next episode, but there are no introductions here, so I'll just say on the next episode of Midnight Viewing, we're going to be taking a look at Tales from the Darkside, Season 1, Episodes 2 and 3. Those are I'll Give You a Million and Painkiller. Midnight Viewing is a proud member of the Weirding Way Media Network. Our theme song was composed by HP. Until next time, what are you working on? Where can people find it? Mike White.
Well, just like this show, you can find everything that I do over at weirdingwaymedia.com, including The Projection Booth, which is a movie show that I do once a week or more. It's been a lot more this year, so we'll see if I burn out or if I just fade away.
I can also be found over at Weirding Way Media, shooting my mouth off, as they like to say in the old times. A lot of things I work on are weekly, like the Culture Cast, or bi-weekly, like the Bollywood Cinema Club, or monthly, like The Life and Times of Captain Barney Miller, or The Shaggy Detective. The Shaggy Detective. That would be a great show, but that's not what we're doing. The Shabby Detective. Those are monthly. And I work on those with Mike, and I'm here with Father Malone and Mike talking about this. So, yeah.
As for me, you can check out all of my nonsense over at weirdingwaymedia.com. You can hear Noise Junkies, the music podcast I co-host with Mondo Heather's Heather Drain and HP. You can also hear Night Mr. Walters, the Taxi podcast, which I also co-host with HP. Speaking of HP, he wrote our theme song, so a big thanks to him. If you want to hear these episodes a week early and hear other exclusive content or just support us in any way, please go to Patreon/Father Malone. Thank you all for joining us here at Midnight Viewing. Try to enjoy the daylight.